Hello, I'm Alfonzo Alexander, and welcome to the Viable Leadership Podcast. As you know, with the Viable Leadership Podcast, our objective is to bring you leaders who are viable, leaders who have proven over their careers that they understand what it takes to be the type of leader to where you're strong, you're an ethical leader, you're a leader that has sustainable practices that you implement so that people know and understand that the decisions you make are truly viable and are not self-serving, but are ones that are designed to really help protect the whole. And that's what viable leadership is all about. We're super excited today to bring you a truly viable leader, Jim Alderson. Jim is a new board member for us here at the Center for the Public Trust, but we have connected very well and very quickly and become fast friends. And I am grateful that Jim is with us today. Jim has a phenomenal story that proves that he is a viable leader. He had an opportunity in his career to make some decisions, and he made decisions that shows that he is one who truly believes in doing things from an ethical standpoint and leads with integrity. So Jim, we're super excited to have you here. Welcome to the Viable Leadership Podcast today.
Thank you, Alfonso. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're going to just jump right in. And let me remind you guys that are listening, our objective with the Viable Leadership Podcast is to bring you leaders that you can learn from. And we'll engage in dialogue centered around trying to help others achieve things in ways that many people who are uncommon leaders have been able to do, but sometimes you don't know how to navigate through some certain circumstances. And so Jim has certainly in his career proven that he knows how to do that. But let's start at the beginning. Jim, why don't you give us, if you would, a synopsis of your career and just kind of some of the roles that you held as you go throughout your career, and then we'll hone in on a couple of those specifically.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Bozeman, Montana. Went to Montana State University. Started out in engineering for 2 years, and then I switched into accounting. When I got out of school, I went active duty, National Guard, for 6 months, and or I joined the National Guard. Then I went to work for Arthur Anderson in Denver, Colorado. And that's where I got my first look at what I thought was the real professional accountant, the CPA that was wore a suit to work every day and beyond reproach. And that stuck with me. So I was with them for 3 years, and then I decided to move back to Montana and opened up a small town CPA practice. I did that for about 10 years. I audited some hospitals, audited a couple of banks, did tax returns for people. And then the hospital offered me a job in the town there as the hospital CFO. So I became a hospital CFO there, was there 6.5 years. Went to another hospital for a few years. And the reason why I left the hospital in Montana in Whitefish was we were preparing a Medicare cost report. A new management company had come in and told me how they did the cost reports. And I didn't think that was right. It was considered a reserve or a backup set of books that I just didn't agree with. And as a result, lost my job. And then I was forced to move to a smaller town, less pay. And then at that point, I decided to really investigate why I had been let go. After 6.5 years and auditing the hospital for 10 years, I had a 17-year experience with them. And that led me into being a whistleblower under the Federal False Claims Act. And that started a long 13-year job, or second job, I guess you'd call it, into whistleblowing and learning what it's like from the inside to be a whistleblower, and I think the motive, the money, and the misery.
Sure.
Fortunately, I was successful, and now I have retired and live in La Quinta, California.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. Before we get into a little more detail around your experience as a whistleblower, I know based on our conversations and your actions as a whistleblower, you believe that ethics and doing the right thing should be a foundation for good leaders and the decisions that they make. Can you speak to us a little bit about why ethical decision making is important to you and why you think it should be important to any of us that are in positions where we make decisions for organizations?
Well, I think the decision making started in college. I think you start learning about business and you start learning about ethics, and I think you start forming your values then. So when the time comes, my decision was already made what I was going to do. I was going to say no. And it wasn't a snap decision that I went down a list of pluses and minuses. I think my decision was based on that. I just didn't feel right. I'd done a lot of tax returns for people, and I never did 2 tax returns for people, and I wasn't going to do 2 cost reports for people. So when the time comes, your groundwork is already laid. I think so. That's why I think it's important to learn these things in college, and that's why I think it's fun to be on this podcast. Is hopefully you can talk to some university students and tell them that now's the time that they're starting to form their ethical values that carry forward into business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And, one of the things that you mentioned with making the decision and drawing lines in terms of what you will and will not do early, I think it's so critical and so important, particularly for young professionals, because if we're able to do that, then when you get in the moment, the pressure is less. Oftentimes when I've talked to people who have gotten caught up into some ethical challenges, they talk about feeling the pressure and needing to make a decision to do something very immediately. And what I've learned in talking with you and others who were able to avoid getting involved in the negative situations is if you draw your lines before you're faced with that particular situation, then when it comes up, it's not an option for you. So it sounds like, Jim, for you, as you mentioned, doing 2 sets of books, et cetera, was not an option. You'd already decided that the right way to do things is what you're going to do. So you didn't feel that pressure where someone else may have.
Yes. And I just give you one example. When I was at big firm at Arthur Anderson in Denver, I went out on an inventory observation of a huge toy company, $7 million of toys that were supposed to observe the inventory. And the warehouse manager told me, he said, well, now you can get any toys you see you want. You can get the company discounts, 50%. I had a 2-week-old daughter. And I looked at the guy and I said, I'm not a company employee. I can't get a discount. So I went home empty-handed. And my wife looked at me like, are you kidding me? You had all these toys you could have gotten. And I said, but I wasn't a company employee, and I didn't like when the guy offered me a 50% discount on the toys. So in retribution, I told the guy, that big stack over there, 15 feet tall, 10 feet deep, I want to see the box in the middle, see if there's any toys in it.
Mm.
And I think little things like that, if you get attuned like that, then when something big comes up, you've already set your groundwork.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Great story. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, you mentioned earlier being a whistleblower, and, I first became familiar with you by watching a 60 Minutes clip. And I know there was a healthcare fraud situation that you were a whistleblower with. Tell us how you went through the process of deciding to become the whistleblower and what the impact of that was for you and even your family.
Well, after I was fired, I moved from a nice house. My daughter was just had just enrolled as a freshman in college. My son had just gotten his freshman high school football equipment. Life was good. And then I found myself 300 miles away in a $150 a month apartment, commuting home on weekends in the wintertime in Montana. And I wondered, like, why did I get fired? And then this conversation came back to me. Maybe it was that cost report thing. So I filed a wrongful discharge action. And in that, I asked for information regarding this whole method of the second set of books and the two cost reports. Once I got that information, I realized that it was a huge issue. It was nationwide, and I think apparently a lot of hospitals were doing it. The Medicare program, the audit program at that point was, I felt, very inefficient, very understaffed, inefficient, and pretty easy to take advantage of. So I became aware of the False Claims Act, and I thought, if this is as big as I think it could be, maybe I've got an obligation to turn it into the government. And I thought you turn it in the government and you wait and they do all the work. And as it turns out, that was far from it. It takes a lot of work. And I think what I realized that you have to have the documentation. If you're a whistleblower, you have to have the truth, and you have to believe it's the truth to withstand the process of going through it.
Got it. Well, no, thank you for that. I know that can be an emotional journey, and as I've met other whistleblowers, and they talk to me about the patience that you have to have, the ability to persevere that you have to have, and the willingness to stand on your morals and principles. So I really appreciate that about you. When you think back about your experience, whether it be as a whistleblower or your experience as a CPA in public accounting, or even when you're in management accounting, serving as a CFO of different organizations, what advice would you give to a young person that may be getting ready to start his or her career on just in general how to be an effective leader as you go throughout your career?
As I think back, I think it's the little things. If your employees see that you're bagging your expense reports, if you're taking advantage of things in the company, then they watch that. One of my mentors always put 10 cents into the coffee pot. Just a little thing. I thought, wow, you could get it for free. You're the owner. He said, yeah, but that's how you show what you're doing. I think the other thing that college students have to know is that you can make money doing things honestly. You can survive in the hospital environment. You can survive in the defense industry. Many other retails, computer software, all these things. You can make money and do it in an honest thing.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And, I tell people all the time, sometimes it may take a little bit longer, but the opportunity and the peace of mind is even greater if you do it the honest way and you have that longevity, which is what we equate to being viable because of the period of time that you have. So if you were to think back about your life and career, what would you say has been one of the most impactful things that shaped who you are as a man and as a leader?
Well, I guess I think back to the day when I interviewed an intern for Arthur Anderson in 1968 in their home office, and there was such a prestige to being a CPA. And I think I took that forward and always tried to, whenever I signed my name to something, I took great pleasure in that, signed that James F. Alderson CPA. And so I think signing my name as a CPA probably each time meant a lot to me. Then when I became a whistleblower, I had filed a lawsuit on my own without an attorney. And I realized how hard I had to work, that the government was understaffed, undermanned there, and it was going to be up to me. And I think that was one of the telling moments that I learned, was just how hard you had to do to prove yourself. But I made one caveat, and I told everybody this in the beginning: as soon as somebody proves to me that I'm wrong, I'll quit. I'm not going to quit until then. And that probably led me down the path. It took a total of 13 years from start to finish.
Way to stand on your principles. When you think about in today's world, you had a really difficult journey in terms of that 13-year experience, I would imagine. But what's life like for you today?
Well, life is good. I'm one of the successful ones, and I won't say lucky. I'll just say I'm one of the fortunate ones. Only 5% of the federal whistleblowers turn out to be successful. It's a long battle, but I've been able to do some good things. We've been able to provide scholarships to a lot of university students. We started a program in entrepreneurship at Montana State, where you can major in a business or engineering and get a minor in entrepreneurship and small business.
Awesome.
And I go out and I speak to college groups. I really enjoy going into the classrooms, because I think I'm going to make a difference. Not in everybody, but out of 30 students in the class, I think probably like 5 of them, you think, okay, going to make a difference, because I kind of put that onus on them, that you're now at the point where you're starting to form your ethical values for the business world, and hopefully I can make a difference. So I think any time I've gone and felt I've made a difference in somebody's life, then that's success for me.
Sure. No, that's great. I understand and really respect the value that you can bring to a classroom. So we have a lot of faculty that watch and listen to this podcast. So I would encourage you, faculty members, if you are someone that would like to have Jim, speak to students in your classroom, let us know. You can reach him through our social media channels with the CPT. We'd be happy to connect you with them. But that personal and true and real life experience is invaluable, Jim. So I appreciate that you take the time to do that. When you think about some of the challenges that you hear and see young professionals face today, what are some things that pique your attention about what they experience and how they might compare to some of the experiences that you had when you were a young professional? Things are very different.
Well, I think what a lot of the young professionals are facing now is the phenomenal amount of money that people can make on startups and compensation, stock options, and that can lead to some serious wrongdoing or decisions that companies are making to raise their stock prices on perhaps false and misleading information. So I think all those students going out, getting into business, are going to be faced with some ethical situations, and they might be in a situation like me. I had a mortgage, one kid in college, one kid in high school, making $43,000 a year. When you know other people in your same position at that company are making $500,000, it's like, wow, what am I going to do? But I will say my family stood behind me on it. That even when it was over, well, Dad, you made the right decision, and you wouldn't have done anything different. So, I feel good about the way that it turned out.
Good. Thank you. Well, I've just got one last question, and that is, if you could give some advice to a young Jim Alderson just coming out of college, ready to start his career, based on what you know today, what would that advice be?
Well, the short version is the word integrity. If you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. And I think that's what I try to leave with the students, that if you get into a situation that you're uncomfortable with, don't go along with it. Now, I don't give the textbook version of what you're supposed to do when you find something wrong in a company. All, steps 1 through 7. Number one step that I do is just, you don't go along with it. Stutter, just make some excuse. You got to go to the bathroom or something, or you want more time to think about it if you're presented with something that you think is wrong. The second thing is try to go to a compliance officer. Most companies now, and all anybody that has jobs with the federal government has to have a compliance officer. But be aware that they're not always efficient. Many times they're controlled by the CEO and the CFO of the company. Lots of times the CFO of the company is the compliance officer. So if he's involved in the wrongdoing, he or she, that's not going to take you anywhere. But take that avenue, and then look for another job. If you find that it's really big and something that really needs to be addressed, then take it through. If it's the federal government, take it through to the False Claims Act and be a federal whistleblower. But number one is don't go along with it. You don't want that on your record when something comes down, because the first thing they're going to say is, boy, you went along with it, you did this. And they of course tried that on me, and that didn't work. But had I gone along with it just a little bit, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Sure. Jim, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. This has been phenomenal. Your wisdom and insight is tremendous. I think any of you guys that are listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, you'll understand what I'm about to say. Wisdom comes in so many different packages, and so many different experiences can lead to us developing our own level of wisdom. What you just heard today is a tremendous amount of wisdom from a viable leader, Mr. Jim Alderson. Jim, I respect you. I thank you for the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do to try and help shape the minds of young people. We appreciate you joining us today on the Viable Leadership Podcast. For those of you guys that are listening, feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or anything that you'd like to know in terms of follow-up with Jim, and we'll make sure that you get that information back. Be on the lookout for our next episode. We'll be bringing you episodes a couple times a month, and we will make sure that we continue to help you understand what it means to be a viable leader, so that you can be on your way to being a viable leader just like Jim Alderson. Thank you so much for joining us, and remember, be great. You've just listened to the Viable Leadership Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And I also want to let you know that you can find out all kinds of other information on the NASBA Center for the Public Trust and the Student Center for the Public Trust on our website. It is the THECPT, so Charlie Paul Tom.org. That's thecpt.org. There's information out there that you can find on all of the programs that we have, both for the professional marketplace as well as for students. We look forward to communicating with you and interacting with you, not just on our website, but on all our social channels as well. We're available on LinkedIn, we're available on Instagram and Facebook. So go check us out. And again, thank you for joining the Viable Leadership Podcast. Have a great one.